Good morning. It's a beautiful Monday morning here in Lagos, Nigeria, and we thank you for joining us on TVC Breakfast. I am Kemi Fola Adeyemo. With me is Kelly Agiga. Good to see you.
Well, good to see you, Kemi.
Right. Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, first off, Sam Omashe and Mike Okoche aren't with us on the program today, but nonetheless, we still look forward to a great show, looking at an array of topics. But this Monday morning, we are a bit sober, looking at the disturbing video that circulated early Sunday. Up until this moment, is still a feeling of outrage, like I said, soberness at the state of things in Nigeria. I'm talking specifically about that disturbing video of yet another batch of hostages being beaten relentlessly, subjected generally to inhumane treatment. Of course, generally one would say it's a propaganda agenda on the part of the terrorists, you know, but looking at fellow Nigerians, looking at human beings, you know, being subjected through no cause of their own, they only happen to be at the right place at the wrong time.
Yes, Kemi, I'm indeed very sad. I am heartbroken. I seen that video on Sunday and seen what Nigerians been made to go through. I saw men in that video. I saw women, but I also saw children. They look like they are even still sucking. So it appears that we even have nursing mothers in that particular video. I'm really, really upset. I'm worried also. There's also a feeling of anger, so to say, that these persons, I mean, were only traveling. They didn't do anything wrong. The only mistake was the fact that they decided to travel by train, which is a means of transportation in this country that we are only trying to encourage Nigerians to buy into. The government has spent a lot of money on,
in revamping.
And Nigerians should now go through that channel of transportation. And, you know, it was indeed a very terrible video to watch. As I said, I'm really heartbroken. I feel for these persons who are still in captivity. They have been there now for more than maybe 115 days. As I said the last time, I was keeping track with that. And it's interesting to see Mr. President react as usual through the likes of Garba Shehu. The president said he will leave no stone unturned to ensure bandits and terrorists are finally crushed. Promises, promises, promises. That is what we've seen for almost 8 years now. I mean, we see an attack and then we see the governor or the presidents come out to, you know, to reassure Nigerians and vow that, oh, we'll deal decisively with them. I remember the Niger attack. Mr. President was far away in Portugal and then he made promises, oh, we're going to ensure that we look for these persons, whatever hole they are in, we'll find them, we'll do this to them. These are all promises. And it was also very, Kemi must mention, very worrying to see that the terrorists are also bragging that one of their members is now reunited with them as a result of the Kuje correctional jailbreak.
Right.
How did he find his way from the nation's capital to
Kelly,
in Kaduna?
Let's bring you some news updates at this time, and we begin with the Minister of Finance, as well as her power counterpart and the Director General of the Bureau for Public Enterprises. Well, these individuals are to appear before the House Committee on Finance over a planned sale of 5 power plants. Also to appear before the committee are the managing directors of the Niger Delta Power Holding Company and the Nigeria Bulk Electricity Trading Company. The power plants in contention belong to the 3 tiers of government. In separate letters to the agencies, Chairman of the committee, Honorable James Faleke, hinted that the process indicated for the sale of the power plants was unconstitutional and a disservice to the nation's development. Considering the critical role the agency is playing in sustainable energy sector in the country, the House of Reps Committee also requested to stop all further processes regarding the transaction. Our next report contains disturbing images, and so viewer discretion is advised. Well, barely 4 months after the attack on the Abuja-Kaduna bound train that left at least 8 persons dead, many of the hostages are still languishing in the terrorist camp. The terrorists have now released another video showing the captives being tortured in an unknown location which appears to be a forest. And in the video, the hostages can be seen crying and calling for help as they were being bitten by the gun-wielding terrorists. One of the insurgents says the captives will be sold off as slaves if their demands aren't met by the government. Speaking in Hausa, he says the authorities must meet their demands or they will kill some of the captives. Dressed in military camouflage, the terrorists also promised to attack other regions of the country as they claim to be on a mission. Now, this group of captives have spent at least 119 days in the forest with their abductors. 63 of them were kidnapped, 20 regained freedom in batches, and at least 43 others are still in captivity. The presidency has called for media support to end terrorism in Nigeria, reacting to a viral video which surfaced on Sunday showing terrorists torturing captives from the Kaduna-bound train. The senior special assistant to the president, Garba Shehu, says the security forces aren't clueless or helpless. Mr. Shehu added that the military isn't relenting and is actively aware of the responsibilities. He noted that while terrorism is a global scourge nationwide or worldwide, all actors, that's the military, civilian population, and communication service providers, must collaborate to bring an end to the menace. The presidential aide asked the media to increase its support for the fight against the exploitation of the internet and social media for terrorist purposes. Talking insecurity, gunmen have attacked a police station in Opanam, Oshimili North local government area of Delta State, killing at least 3 officers who were responding to a distress call by members of a local vigilante. The state public relations officer of the Nigeria Police, Edafe Bright, confirmed that one of the attackers has been arrested. TVC News Ikena Michi has more.
This is Opanam, a suburb of Asaba, the capital of Delta State. Early Sunday morning, some gunmen stormed and attacked the local vigilantes who were stationed at strategic points and the divisional police station. The police public relations officer confirms the incident via phone call.
Men of Opanam Division, while responding to a distress call, were ambushed by unknown persons, unknown armed hoodlums, and they killed 3 of our personnel. The command has been able to arrest one of the suspects who is helping us with useful information. We're also using this opportunity to call on members of the public who has 1 or 2 information that can help us to avail us with such information.
3 of the local vigilantes sustained injuries and are recuperating, with one of them in severe condition at the emergency ward of the Federal Medical Center, Asaba. TVC News spoke with their leader.
Exactly, I don't actually know what happened because we shared ourselves. Some people are in the other side, we are in the other side with all these guys. Early this morning, one of my men called me, Oga, see what is happening, see what is happening. We are in Chelsea Hospital, and I said, wow. I rushed down to a Chelsea Hospital. I see so many people lying down. One of them is fainting, and I took that one, put inside my car, drove down here. That is why we're here treating the guys this morning. But they just told me that police people are shot, my men are caught. I'm totally mad. I don't know what to do.
While investigation is still ongoing to ascertain the identity of the gunmen, reports say the incident may not be unconnected to the attack in May, where members of the IPOB wanted to enforce sit-at-home order in Ugbolu, a neighboring community in the local government area. Ikenna Amechi, TVC News, Okpanam, Delta State.
Thanks for staying with us on TVC Breakfast. Let's head into looking at top stories on Nigerian newspapers at this time. We have a host of papers to look at, beginning here in Nigeria, and then we'll dip in and see what's happening across the world. So we begin with The Punch this morning, and it's an update on, of course, preparations for the general election coming next year. 1 hour interview. It says PDP challenges Tinubu again. APC says Asiwaju will floor Atiku. Tinubu should subject himself to 1 hour interview. Atiku's camp insists. Of course, this has to do with the back and forth between the two presidential candidates of the ruling party and the main opposition, the PDP. Now to the blueprint. Now, a new video on abducted train passengers. Terrorists threaten President Buhari. El-Rufai torture victims, vow to slay some, sell others if federal government fails to pay ransom in 1 week. That's for Blueprint. And of course, this insecurity, worrying trends of insecurity also reflects on the lead story of Nigerian News Direct. Terrorists threaten to kidnap President Buhari, El-Rufai and other politicians as FG declares threat as mere propaganda. Well, it remains to be seen, but of course the federal government still talking tough there against this war and security challenges. The Nation is next. It calls its big story security on red alert over threat to Buhari and El-Rufai. Of course, it's about the train attack. Insurgents threatened to attack the president and the Kaduna state governor. That's the Nation. Kelly has some with him.
Well, Daily Trust is next. It stays with the big story in the past 24 hours. Kaduna train, how ransom blockade triggered hostage beating video. And presidency reacts as terrorists threaten to abduct Buhari, VP, and others. That's Daily Trust and the Kaduna train attack and the very trending video Nigerians are yet to recover from. Only 24 hours ago. This Nigeria gets our attention next. Insecurity terrorists threaten to kidnap top politicians. Terrorists threaten to kidnap top politicians. Big threat for Nigerian politicians. Still referring to the video. There are threats for governors, senators. According to the terrorists, they are coming big for these persons in position of authority. And away from this Nigeria, the Daily Times is next. It says Abuja-Kaduna train attack. Presidency reacts to terrorist video. Says defense forces are not clueless. They are not helpless. It's interesting to see the position of the presidency speaking out and speaking up for the defense forces, saying they are not clueless, they are not helpless. But they've been there for more than 1 year plus now. Nigerians would wonder, just how has the fight against insurgency and banditry been if these people are not clueless or helpless? Away from the Daily Times, the leadership newspaper gets our focus. It says, as terrorists torture Kaduna train attack victims, presidency explains why the military can't carpet bomb forests now. As terrorists torture Kaduna train attack victims. I think that word captures what these people are going through. It is indeed torture for many of these captives. Presidency explains why military can't carpet bomb forests now. First News is next. Away from the leadership, it says Nigeria may break up in 2024. The statement is accredited to Gani Adams, who is warning. He identifies worsening insecurity as a major pointer to impending doom. Nigeria may break up in 2024. Gani Adams warns the Areno Kakanfo of Yoruba land. He identifies worsening insecurity as major pointer to impending doom. We do not pray for this. We do not wish this at all. And of course, away from a bit of insecurity, the Abuja Inquirer says House Sanitation team uncovered Abuja's biggest cannabis farm. House Sanitation team uncovered Abuja's biggest cannabis farm. The Abuja Inquirer says that's the major rider there for the Abuja Inquirer. Business Nigeria's Next says new NNPC draws mixed bag of reactions. New NNPC draws mixed bag of reactions. Of course, Nigerians woke up to the news last week Tuesday about the fact that the NNPC has now been transitioned to a commercial entity. And of course, the reactions continue to trail that particular move, that particular privatization by the federal government. The national economy, the last year, it says fuel subsidy to go up 23 trillion naira in 17 years. Massive indeed, the national economy, fuel subsidy to go up 23 trillion naira in 17 years. Whoa.
All right, Kelly, we're from Nigeria now. We go to the Middle East. Gulf News, Dubai-based newspaper, is leading with an update on the Russia-Ukraine war. Now it says Ukraine prepares to resume grain exports. Of course, we know how the Hydra-headed Russia-Ukraine war has, been not just having direct impact within the areas now, but even internationally. Africa too bearing the brunt. Flour, wheat and oil, it is expensive, all traced to this war. Well, Ukraine is said to be preparing to resume grain exports now. We'll see how that plays out. Possibly a green light, everyone hopes. Now to the national newspaper. This is a UK-based daily. It says UN Security Council meets over Iraq resort shelling. UN Security Council meets over Iraq resort shelling. Yet another security concern, this time globally. All right, back here in Nigeria, we were talking a moment ago about the disturbing video that circulated yesterday up until this morning. Of course, reactions still trailing it. It's been rightly called. Nigerians have rightly reacted to it angrily. Of course, a feeling of helplessness. But a takeaway, or another takeaway for me, Kelly, was in that video, we also saw a woman who was more or less daring, confronting the terrorists, lambasting them, insulting them. The fact that, her spirit appeared not to be broken, of course, one can imagine the kind of condition she would have been, what she would have even undergone before that moment. But her still finding a voice now to face her detractors, and telling them, shame on you, judgment is coming on you. I found that, really amazing. But of course, it doesn't, remove the dire straits that we are in as a country. And now to the president's reaction. Over time, we've of course heard president and security officials saying that they know where these people are, but attacking the terrorists would more or less lead to collateral damage, which the country or the government or its advisors are advising against. But, right. How then do we now rescue these individuals without government taking some more drastic measures than like or in line with what people are asking? Kemi,
I think barely 2 years ago, I don't know if it's up to 2 years, we heard that some Americans were kidnapped here in this country, and the American government sent a team of, I think, just 6 military officers. They came here without any announcement to anybody. We only heard that those that were kidnapped, I think somewhere in the northeast, I'm not sure if it's northeast or northwest region, but all we heard was that those Americans that were kidnapped had been rescued, not by the Nigerian government, but by a team of 6 persons from the American Navy or Marine or something. And I'm not sure any place was bombed. I'm not sure there was any explosion anywhere to rescue those persons. This is strictly intelligence, for crying out loud. We can't keep saying we don't want to bomb a forest. Nobody is saying you should even bomb the forest. But if you have to take that step, I mean, I think it was when Barack Obama was president, and we saw the televised operation of how it was Osama bin Laden that was arrested. We saw how the American government and its military officers went into action and they had a very smooth operation with the president watching live. I saw it live many, many years ago. Look, that is no excuse for this particular administration, especially when the government came into power in 2015 under the grounds and the messiah figure of Mr. President, who is a military or retired military veteran. We had seen the incumbent president then as someone who was maybe not too strong enough, or maybe someone who is not too weak. Nigerians had labeled him names. So Mr. President came on the wings of the Messiah. In fact, it was another Jesus Christ, so to say, for many Nigerians. And it is interesting to see that almost 8 years after, we are still where we are, or we are back to where we are. Maybe this particular administration may argue that things are better, but if you have found yourself or your family member, I mean, because one of the reactions from Mr. President is, he also commiserated with the former national chairman of the PDP, Adamu Muazu, whose brother was killed by the terrorists and whose sister has also been kidnapped. If you have family members who are going through or who have gone through being kidnapped for just 5 days, let alone being in captivity for more than 100 days, and look at the video. I think the word is torture. The word is agony. The word is anguish. You can imagine people in such a very terrible condition. And then the presidency would tell Nigerians and the media to support the government. I'm wondering what else we need to do as the media. I'm wondering what else Nigerians need to do. But gradually, Kenya, let me just say this now. When you look at the motto of the Nigeria, under the coat of arms, it has unity and faith, peace and progress. Nigerians have gradually lost faith. We've lost faith in the government of the day. We've lost faith in the leadership. We've lost faith in the political class or elite. And we're gradually getting to the point where, I mean, even for people to describe themselves as being Nigerian is becoming a big blow. I mean, it's like some of us are not even proud to accept that
in spite of all these challenges, it's also, would I say, heartwarming, or, you know, in spite of all this, we still have people who are hopelessly, you know, given to the fact that we are better off united than being otherwise. I mean, look at somebody in the person of Gani Adams, a leader here in the Southwest now, who is even making some, you know, dire predictions.
Well, predictions or prophecy.
While we do not, we know, want to pander to that, you know, but then it's just giving a sense of the growing level of discontent in the country as to the way things are handled. And, you know, sometimes I believe that the security forces, even though they are, you know, extremely stressed at the moment, I don't think we obviously don't have the capacity, or they don't have the capacity to withstand the enormity of the level of insecurity across the country. I mean, almost no state is immune. We've said over and over again. But then we need to keep talking. We need to keep urging the government, because we have the intelligence, we have the professionals, of course, but there seems to be a foundational problem, so to speak, that, you know, disables our security forces from, you know, pushing further. And now we look at, before we were calling them bandits, but these are, well, they can still be called bandits, but now they have assumed a more frightening dimension. They have support from elsewhere. There's still the speculation, and growing by the day, that there is even more support even within the system, the same system that was built to, you know, be formidable against this marauders we have. There seems to be some level of sympathy, because how then do they happen to be at, you know, specific areas at the moment when, you know, people are passing by? And of course, the fact that they don't seem to now be the bane of regular Nigerians. We've even seen wealthy Nigerians who have, of course, you know, been victims of these, you know, brazen acts of insecurity. All right, yes. So what do we need to do now? That's a big question. That's a big question.
I was just going to say, I mean,
indeed.
Your last, your final words were the fact that some big Nigerians have been affected. Truthfully, the many millions of average Nigerians or common Nigerians would be happy. As a matter of fact, when you look at even the threats to Mr. President and the likes of governors, including El Rufai and senators, the average Nigerian who is back home will be saying, look, thank God the threats are also for those in power, those in government.
So they feel it.
And so they feel it. And we're just saying just before we came on set that, look, perhaps if our leaders were not, if perhaps we're not entitled to the kind of security detail that they do have, maybe some of them would have fallen victims to what we have seen. Because, I mean, Mr. President's advance team, for instance, was attacked just a few weeks ago. So one can only imagine, what if these governors are not clustered around with security officers and all of that? What would have happened?
Thanks for staying with us. For 5 months and counting, the Academic Staff Union of Universities, ASUU, has been on strike to press home its demands, which include a revamp of the nation's university infrastructure, as well as payment of members' salaries through the recommended University Transparency and Accountability Solution, that's called UTAS. Well, that's not all. Part of ASUU's demands also include implementation of the 2009 agreement reached with the federal government, amongst others. And after several meetings between ASUU and the government failed to yield results, the Nigeria Labour Congress is now set to proceed on what it calls a solidarity protest to compel the government to meet ASUU's demands. The two-day nationwide protest, which government has tagged illegal, is scheduled to hold on Tuesday, July the 26th, and the day after, Wednesday. Joining us now in the studio is the Deputy Chairman, Joint Action Front, Achike. Good to see you again. Welcome.
It's always a pleasure.
Right, yeah. Always a pleasure. So, well, there's been a back and forth. The government saying it's illegal, who is NLC to come into this matter. It seems to be in control. Of course, ASUU and NLC and the other affiliates maintaining their ground that indeed an injury to one is an injury to all. So what do you make of this back and forth? There's no going back from your end?
No, I mean, from everything that's on ground, this is one protest that should have taken place a long time ago. But perhaps the NLC did not wade into it directly because they were giving the government an opportunity and the various partners to see how they can resolve this issue that has become intractable. And so they have a duty, they have an obligation. We all actually have a duty and an obligation to ensure that education, the bedrock of national development and progress, is given the kind of attention that is needed. Whatever credibility today, little credibility, for instance, the university system has in Nigeria today, is as a result of the many years of agitation and struggle by ASUU. You can imagine if the ASUU leadership never thought it expedient, never thought it as an emergency, for instance, to try to do something about the rot in the education system, where the university system would be today. Of course, people are talking about the quality of students that are produced from our university system. The government is aware. They did a needs assessment some years back, and the result was frightening. About the state of decay and dilapidation in our university system. And on the basis of that, they made commitments to revamp the university system, not for the sake of ASUU, but for the sake of the country. And unfortunately, we have seen how it goes in Nigeria. It's one thing, but there is a saying that where a man's treasure is, there his heart will be. And so the treasures of our political elites are found in the best educational institutions all over the world, not in Nigeria, and that is why you're having the kind of crisis that you're having in the educational system. So as NLC has a duty and an obligation to do what they're doing, regardless of what people are saying about the legality or illegality of the action. Of course, the man who made that statement about the illegality of the NLC's action was only expressing an opinion. And it is my own opinion that his description of the status of that strike, that protest is wrong. So he expressed an opinion, and
I wonder if you think that's his opinion or the opinion of the government of the day. And perhaps let me also ask you, what do you consider as the fears of this particular administration as regards protests? Is it in any way connected to the NSAS protest or the aftermath of the NSAS protest?
Well, the government is afraid of everything, it appears. Of course, in a season where terrorists are threatening to kidnap the president of the country. So where does that leave you? So they are virtually, afraid of everything, and of course do not have a solution to what is going on. But even beyond that is the fact that even the president himself has passed a vote of no confidence on his own administration over the handling of this ASUU crisis. The president has indicted his government for being irresponsible with regards to what is going on. And you ask me, when did the president say so? The president said this before he took over power. He said that in critiquing or criticizing his predecessor, Goodluck Jonathan and the PDP, he said any government that would allow the nation's institutions, tertiary institutions, to remain closed for so long is an irresponsible government. So you see, the thing about life, karma and nemesis, they are doing a very serious work in this in administration, and what goes around comes around. This was what the president said because he was angry. He was asking why any serious government would allow the nation's institutions, tertiary institutions, to close down, and that it must be an irresponsible government. Some years down the line, he was, confronted with the same thing. He was confronted with an opportunity to engage with the same people, and he did exactly what his predecessors did, yes, perhaps even worse.
Comrade, I remember that particular video. I think it was an interview TVC granted Mr. President in 2014, just yes, before he eventually became Mr. President. But let me ask you, any meaningful government would express fears about a shutdown of the country. We have not recovered from the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. We went into recession in this particular administration. There is an ongoing war in Ukraine. The economy has been shattered. We saw the Minister of Finance and Planning, Zainab Ahmed, saying that Nigeria is broke. So I wonder if you think that Mr. Lai Mohammed's position for once may not be right, maybe to an extent, that the strike is uncalled for, because a shutdown would again affect the economy, which is already struggling.
As if they've been interested in the economy. But beyond that, they say a desperate situation calls for a desperate measure. And the reality is that if we had been, adequately politically conscious in this country, if we had been adequately aware of our duties and responsibilities as citizens, we will be shutting down the country every single day until our politicians realize that they have to sit out, that the people are not fools. We should have been doing this a very long time. So we are all suffering from our, laxity, our inability to truly appreciate the dire political circumstances that we find ourselves in. And that's why the country is tottering on the verge of collapse.
This government has been, of course, will I say now, has gotten more than its own fair share of discontent from university lecturers and even of other subsidiaries. It's not only ASUU that is even on strike. Indeed, there's a total shutdown of the university structure, not just at the federal level, but even the state levels. ASUU has also gone on strike, as well as its affiliates, like I said earlier. So this has been on since February the 14th, and some have said under the principle of collective bargaining, a lot of time has passed. There ought to have been, some give and take on the part of both sides. Where do you stand in this?
You see, collective, bargaining decisions are arrived at as a result of negotiations, and negotiations are entered into, on the basis of a desire, to want to give and take, the basis of the desire to act in good faith. So what we have seen over the years is ASUU acting in good faith, but the government always vitiating whatever agreements they have. You want to ask yourself, why is ASUU on strike? Why are they on strike? They're on strike because there was an agreement, that the government entered into willingly and voluntarily. And then the government now says they are not going to do it. They will not be able to do it, or for whatever reason, that they are not going to implement it. ASUU, of course, gave warnings. They have always done that, because we should always try to appreciate the position of any union that goes on strike. It is always a tremendously difficult situation to find yourself in, where you have to call all your affiliates across the 36 states of the country. You have to discuss with them. You have to negotiate with them. It's even get their buy-in. You also have to spend money because, you know, they have to travel from one state to the other on a continuous basis to discuss. What do we do? How do we respond to this? And they say, okay, write them, you know, dialogue with, and all of that. And it gets to a level where they realize, look, we are not making any progress because these people think that we're joking or that we're jokers. And you know why this thing has dragged on for so long? It's this understanding. The government, you know, officials feel that they have this understanding that the average Nigerian has a threshold. So allow them to suffer, you know, allow, you know, hunger to set in, and then they are frustrated. And before you know it, there will be division within the ranks. Some saying, look, let's go back, regardless of you know, of what is at stake and the rest, and others holding out. And then they are hoping that the internal, you know, rancor would prevail ultimately at the end of the day, and then the rank of ASUU is broken. But ASUU is not just any other union. ASUU is a completely different union. ASUU has, you know, a collegiate responsibility, and they do things together. Every chapter of ASUU is involved in the negotiating process. Every chapter is involved in the discussion that leads to, you know, a strike. And that's why in most cases they hold on.
Right, and still on the issue of strike, some have also said at this time now, what good have the strikes, you know, brought us? Of course, the unionists are saying they will continue to have this tool at hand, even as a last option, until they get more form of, you know, a sense of a more responsible listening government. Shouldn't ASUU now and, you know, other unions, you know, be exploring other ways to make government listen? Other
creative ways, maybe.
You know, this is just, you know, the kind of statement people who just want to play devil's advocacy will make. Because I understand the situation you find yourself in. You must be seen at least to look at the other side, one way or the other. You know, but the reality is that they have always explored. And we talk about dialogue. The government talks about dialogue. It was dialogue that led to the 2009 agreement, which the government unilaterally vitiated. It is dialogue that led even to this situation, because they kept on informing the Nigerian public. We have gotten in touch with the government. The government is not listening. Then they started the process of warning strikes. The government still did not listen, because believe me, you have a government. And look, you ask yourself, how committed are these people to Nigeria? When Bill Gates came to the country some time ago, he was asked a question by journalists. What are the two most critical sectors in a nation? He mentioned two: education, healthcare. We understand why he also included healthcare, because it is critical. Because you have an existing, you know, healthcare issue at every particular point in time. So that is critical, that is important. But education is the base on which you build your healthcare. Just yesterday, I was listening to the Minister of Aviation, Haji Sirika, talking about, you know, not happy about that aviation workers are also
want to join
in the strike. And I chuckled to myself. I smiled and I said, oh, yeah, now they feel it. When they had a crisis, the planes were to shut down in the country, the airlines. Immediately the government responded. Why did the government respond? Because they have to travel. They cannot travel by road, because their incompetence and inability to keep Nigerians safe also makes them unsafe when they travel by road. So air travel is important. And the Minister of Aviation was now suggesting that perhaps, you know, aviation should be declared a critical national security matter. And I smiled and I said, look, why would he, you know, say that when education education should even be more critical, should be a national security imperative? Because it is education that it's on top of education that you build every other sector. You know, and the crisis of insurgency and insecurity that we're having in this country, where do you think it is coming from? It's the lack of education in the country. And so the government did not find anything useful for the citizens, especially the youth of the country. A lot of them, the devil has, you know, found what. Because what education does is that education enhances the person, enhances the mind, and elevates the person. You understand? And so when you want to lead people astray, you want to get them to do things that are antisocial. A person with an elevated mind, you know, realizes that, look, this is not for me. And so these people have nothing to lose, because they have not been sufficiently educated, and then poverty has become part of the consequences of misgovernance in the country. So it's easy for them for the devil to find work for them.
So again, I'll stick to probably what the government might be dreading. When you shut down a country, who suffers the most? The elites or the average Nigerian? Can you just answer that before I give you a follow-up question?
Yeah. Well, I think it has to get to a situation in this country where, for me, where people no longer see a difference between living and dying, and when that distinction can no longer, be determined, then the people will realize that they need to do something in order to build, their country. Because
there's so much hunger in the land at the moment. I must remind you, there's a serious hike. I've had to visit the markets myself. And I tell you what.
So to get a first-hand assessment.
That question should go to the people, to the Nigerian people. Ask them if they are ready to suffer for the next 1-2 weeks and get everything right. Be in a position to feed their children.
Because they've suffered before for 1 week and even more than 1 week.
And fulfill their economic ambitions. Ask them that, and then to continue to suffer for the next 5-10 years.
They have suffered this kind of shutdown. They have suffered this kind of industrial action before, and at the end, nothing changed.
No, because even they realized that it was not properly well done. If it was done properly, and you teach the political class in this country, the irresponsible political elites that we have today in this country, the right kind of lesson, they will respond.
I mean, not all of them are responsible.
But are the results even likely to change now?
Yeah, because I'm wondering what the NLC is willing to do differently. You have been described as a toothless bulldog.
You were asking
they have been tagged as Nigerians who have compromised, who have failed the workers.
Who are you talking about?
The NLC.
The NLC.
So I'm wondering, all of a sudden,
they have
magic?
They have their issues.
What will ensure a determination? What are they going to do differently?
Even in fairness, I think Mr. Chude's first remarks were that this call for action on the part of NLC and of course the affiliate ought to have even come earlier than now.
Obviously, I mean there's no doubt about that, and the fact that a man fail once doesn't mean he cannot get up. They have had their issues. Nigerians have not been happy with them, but there are times they have also stood up to be counted, just like this particular point in time. So we hope that we push it to its logical conclusion. Our children need to get back to the university. And again, there's no need flogging the issue. It's of critical importance to this nation. It's a national security objective and imperative to get our school system to work so that we can produce the right kind of people to lead this country in the years ahead.
Right. Mr. Chude, we'll let you go at this point now. It's a Monday morning. No doubt you have some more engagements to make.
Please, I'm just going to tell him, please,
thank you.
Comrade, tell the NLC that this time around, if eventually they go on this protest, they should do it right and do it well.
Can you say that in 10 seconds?
And assure Nigerians that indeed they won't compromise.
Yes, well, you see, it's now they are worried about their past, because it is the past that is catching up with them, and that's why these comments are coming. And I think the comments are in order, and I hope that lessons have been learned from some of their past failings.
Deputy Chairman, Joint Action Front, Achike Chude, always a pleasure having you with us. Thank you.
It's always a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, comrade.
Thank you. Yeah.
To Imo State, where relatives of those allegedly killed a week ago by Ebubeago security outfit in Imo want justice from relevant authorities. Recall that about 10 Otulu youth who attended the traditional marriage of their relation at ASUU Onama in Oris local government area were allegedly murdered. Well, our correspondent brings us update on this development.
A road leading to the scene of the traditional marriage the youths were allegedly killed tells a story of abandonment, with colossal damage caused by the alleged killers on the house of John Okafor, whose guests were said to have been shot, has been moody and in a state of shock since the incident. He is now homeless, with no hope of a roof over his head again. Since the tragic incident, the people of the area have been protesting what they described as a gruesome killing of their kinsmen, calling on the authorities to disband the state-owned security outfit, Ebubeago. With allegations and counter-allegations, Okezuonu Chijoke, who took his brothers to his in-laws' place for his traditional marriage, gives account of the incident.
All the victims were my brothers. Ebubago murdered my brothers, killed all of them, even to the extent of they bought my in-law house. This is the house. Every damn thing in this house was born by Ebubago. As you can see, you look, this man is nowhere moving, is nowhere going. Since then, this man is crying. Which side, which place he will get money again to build this kind of house again? This man now is homeless.
With bullet shells still dotted at the spot where these youths were gunned down, which is about 3 poles away from the point where the traditional marriage took place. The brother of 2 of the victims is still in shock, losing his 2 brothers in the same spot in one day. But government said the victims were bandits neutralized by DSS.
They carry us go Omuma, local government to Omuma. So now that place where they keep us, start flogging us, tie my 2 hands, and start beating us for that local government. After that night, so they take us inside. In the morning time, they bring us out. I need justice.
What happened on Sunday, which is 1 week ago, is very barbaric, and we don't want to say much about the barbarism of the incident.
We just came out from a Security Council meeting where the DSS confirmed that they did the operation, and the operation has nothing to do with any wedding place. They went to a camp, and they went to the camp with a pointer who is a member of the gang, and they caught some people. And the people are currently with the Department of DSS. Yes, they killed some people, but those were also bandits.
Since then, the Imo State Police Command is here to make an official statement on the matter.
Thanks a lot for staying with TVC Breakfast. So for about 32 years now, the International Gathering of Champions, also called IGOC, has hosted thousands of believers from various parts of the world, with guest speakers touching various topics like relationships, family life, health, amongst others. It's an annual event hosted by the senior pastor of the Kingsway International Christian Center, Matthew Ashimolo, in Kent, the United Kingdom, where Christians have testified to their own personal growth as believers. Now, this year's event will hold from August the 24th to the 28th. And joining us in the studio now to talk more on this is KICC's resident pastor in Nigeria. Of course, the church is based in Maryland here in Lagos. Pastor Femi Fashiru is also the national superintendent of KICC Nigeria. Thank you so much for joining us on TVC Breakfast.
Thank you for having me. Welcome, Pastor.
So we understand this year's event is themed Be Limitless. Tell us how it fits into the overall vision and mission of your church.
KICC is a church where we raise champions and we take territories. IGOC, as we know it now, International Gathering of Champions, started 32 years ago as warriors of righteousness. Warriors of righteousness in the sense that the visionary Pastor Matthew Ashimolo was charged to equip believers to be able to walk the walk of righteousness. And so this conference started 32 years ago to be able to equip believers that way. And then shortly after then, it was then charged to expand the vision of that conference, so as not to limit it to just the walk of righteousness, but also for believers to be able to win in life. And that in itself comes to play with the vision of the ministry, which is to raise champions. So warriors of righteousness then became the gathering of champions. So we not only walk in the walk of righteousness, but we are also winning in life. We win in our relationship, in marriage, we win in business, in career, in the things that the Lord has called us to do. And then we began to see a lot of people were attracted from the international communities, from all the continents of the world. They started to attend the conference. But of course, it has to do with the quality of the depth of the teaching, and also the array of speakers that the Lord will lead Pastor Matthew to bring to the conference every year. I mean, name it. Baba Deboye has been there to speak. Pastor Ayo Rishi Jaffo has been there to speak in the past. Bishop Oyedepo has been there to speak in the past. Bishop Michael Konko has been there. We talk about Noel Jones, Bishop T.D. Jakes, from everywhere. So I think the caliber of speakers, the depth of the teaching has attracted people from all continents of the world into the conference. So it evolved into what we now know today as International Gathering of Champions. So this is a conference where believers are equipped to win in life, to do what God has called them to do, not only successfully, but also to do it excellently well and enjoy doing it God's way.
Okay, I was just going to ask if it's restricted for just believers or just Christians. But just also to add to that is this caliber of speakers you've mentioned, indeed, very, 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 very wonderful indeed. But perhaps you could give us an idea of what speakers to look forward to as regards to this particular gathering this time around.
Yes, IGOC, it's not only for Christians, even though it's focused on Christians. It's for everybody. Thousands of people give their lives to Christ in this conference. It's for everybody. People come. So Christians do come with their friends, come with their family members, and churches even come as a church group into the conference. So it's open to all, everyone, because everyone would indeed be blessed in there. But I must also say that this conference is a conference where a lot of people have testified that it is in that conference that they got their calling. It's in that conference that they got their ministry, and some have even gotten their zeal from that conference. So it's open to all, whether you are a believer, whether you want to know about what Jesus is all about, you want to know about what the power of God is all about, the principles of God. It's open to everyone. And it's not just for young believers. It's also for church leaders. It's also for preachers and teachers of the gospel, because everybody will benefit, everybody will be blessed. There is something you will take away from there.
I mean, we live in times where people are
I asked about the speakers.
openly,
I'm not sure you mentioned
the issue of the speakers, right? Tell us more about that.
The composition of the speakers as laid upon the spirit of Pastor Matthew for this 32nd edition is so powerful. Powerful in the sense that you have the mix of the young and the old. You know, we have Pastor Matthew himself is going to be leading the team. We have Bishop T.D. Jakes, who needs no introduction to anybody. We have from America, we have Dr. Bill Winston. From the African continent, we have Dr. Mesa Otabil. And this year, we have young preachers. One of Pastor Matthew's sons in the ministry that Pastor Matthew groomed for decades is going to be one of the speakers in there. Dr. Dipo Oluyomi will be speaking. Pastor Jerry Eze, who started his church ministry 8 years ago, but has the largest online prayer meeting, is going to be there to also share this year. We have Pastor Biodun Fatoyibo from Koza Abuja will also be there to share. So we actually have a wide range of speakers, and I believe that there's going to be something for everyone.
Right, quickly tell us about this array of speakers, interesting lineup, but really, what's the target?
The target is to stretch believers, is to equip believers to be able to, despite the challenges that they are faced, is for them to be able to be equipped so that they can be a blessing to the world, so that they can do their part in their community. That's the target, for them to, for everyone who comes in there to be ministered to with the word of the Lord, to be taught, to be equipped, so that when the conference is all over, we all go back into our world and our community and be a positive influence right in there, showcasing Christ and what he stands for.
And of course, we live in times where, you know, more and more people are opening, expressing their faith, Christianity, Islam, and otherwise. But, you know, coming back to the service that you and, of course, you know, other pastors, including the lead pastor, Matthew Ashimolo, is offering through KICC, I find that the sense out there is some of the things that we are taught in the church. Now, there seems to be more pressure now to make these teachings more relevant as people face the secular world and its challenges. I don't know how you are faced with that challenge and how you strive to push this into your teachings.
Yeah, even this challenge is not something that we are faced with in our generation alone. The scripture says that do not be hearers of the word alone, but be doers of the word. So practicalizing the word of God that we learn, that we teach, has always been a focal point of ministry, even in Bible times. And that same challenge is there, but we keep on encouraging our congregation. It is not about just come, enjoy the service. It's about taking the word and getting into your world and make a positive impact with your word, with the word that you have received. And the beauty of IGOC conference, particularly this year's one, is that the wisdom that is going to be shared is going to be shared in such a way that it will be practical. So it's not something that is just going to be abstract. That's what I found personally with IGOC conferences, because we have what we call the School of Ministries, the daytime School of Ministry. So it's not just gathering in the evening and, you know, just jumping up. There is School of Ministry where we are taught on practical wisdom to carry out the things we want to do, whether in ministry, whether in business, whether in career, whether you are a community leader or you are in a government position, or whichever way you are to contribute in life.
All right, so it's an annual event. I understand there are sessions. It's good. I'm happy to see that we have some Nigerian music ministers who would be at the event this year. I've seen the likes of Sinach and Nathaniel Bassi.
Choma Jesus.
Yeah.
Choma Jesus.
Even though Muiwa Olariwaju is resident in the UK.
Oh, he's a Nigerian.
He's a Nigerian. He's
turning
big,
point.
He's big, yes. He's big. He's actually Bolaji, Big B's
They're related.
brother.
Oh,
the brothers.
Interesting.
Interesting. Well, so I'm sure registration is required from what I saw for this event.
Yes, there is need for registration, whether you want to attend actual. So we're actually encouraging people to come to the UK if they can and be part of it in actual, in person. But if you
It's where in the UK?
It's going to be in KICC Prayer City, is in Kent.
All right.
If you want to, if you're not able to come to the UK, yes, you can watch virtually. But for registration, they should please visit igoc.org.uk. All the information about the registration.
Can you go by that again? IGOC?
igoc.org.uk.
Right.
igoc.org.uk.
Right, Pastor Fashiro, let's pass the remaining few minutes we have now to talk about, you know, the state of the nation. And I would start my question in looking at the role Christians have played so far in nation building. Some have said, what good have Christians brought on board? If you look at, level of corruption, they've said, okay, so what good? All the teachings learned in the church, how much have you practicalized them? They say Nigeria is saturated with many churches, but then what value has this brought? How has this enhanced development and peace in the society? And on the other hand, there are some people who are saying even now, as we're heading to the general election of next year, that, you know, religion should be left in private and not in public spaces, as against what we are seeing now, that Christians are speaking more and more, is speaking about its own choice of the next crop of leaders. I've asked two questions. I don't know if we'll be able to, you know, measure this in your answer.
Yeah, I want to say that the contribution of the church in our nation cannot be overlooked. I believe that Nigeria is blessed with Christians in Nigeria. 2020, no one can still explain why people were not just falling off and dying like it was predicted when
during COVID.
COVID-19 pandemic.
Nobody can explain that, but I know that Nigeria is a praying nation. Could that be one of the reasons why we were hit like that? So I just leave that. When you look at statistics all around Africa, and you look at the epidemics of things like diseases, even if you look at HIV, AIDS, why don't we have high numbers like they have in South Africa? Because somebody keeps on preaching to people on Sundays, on Wednesdays, on Tuesdays, because of the churches. Why don't we have, despite what we have in Nigeria, sometimes you look around and it could be almost like an hopeless situation we see. When we talk about economy, when we talk about the youth, we've been to school and out of school. Parents have spent their money, their savings to send their kids to school. They come out of school, there is no job or no gainful employment. And yet these guys are still happy, they're still alive, they're not throwing themselves into the lagoon. Why? Because there are churches that are equipping them with hope, even in the midst of hopelessness. We cannot underestimate the work that God is doing and using the churches to do. Believers are contributing.
All right.
Even though
and then to the latter part, of my question now, of course, APC, PDP and the likes, they've come out with their candidates and all, but the loudest reaction has been the emergence of a Muslim ticket of the APC. Where do you stand in this debate?
My stance on this is basically for everyone to go get their PVC, because that will give you a right. That will give you your right to vote.
All right.
And your right to vote will basically be for you to vote for the candidate of your own choice.
Resident Pastor, KICC Maryland, and National Superintendent. Apologies, Kelly, we've run out of time. We thank you very much for your contributions on TVC Breakfast this morning, Pastor Femi Fashiru.
Thank you for having me.
I appreciate what you're doing with the church.
You're watching TVC Breakfast. Let's head now to the streets of Port Harcourt in Rivers State to get the views of newspaper readers to trending stories in Nigeria at this time. Of course, TVC's correspondent Uche Okuro is our guide. Good morning, Uche. Over to you.
Good morning. Thank you for coming to Port Harcourt this morning. Let me just get let me go straight to business and talk to a number of persons who are here. Quite a number of them who want to air their views, so I want to give them enough time to do so. Good morning. I know him. He's Ezenwa. Good morning to you. Let's just talk about the headlines straight away. Which of them would you want to air your views on?
Okay. Good morning. Daily Sun, anxiety mounts as Nigerians' debt service lies deeper.
Front page headline here says IPOB, Kanu's family rejoice over UN intervention. But this morning, Ezenwa wants to talk about the headline at the top right corner. Anxiety mounts as Nigeria's debt service slides deeper. Go ahead, my brother.
Good morning once again. Cannot Ezenwa.
Okay.
Yeah. So, obviously, this is actually a sardonic situation that we've seen ourselves today in Nigeria. A very sinister one concerning the debt service and the borrowing. Because I'm not against the idea of a borrowing. Yes, we borrow. Even statistically speaking, when you look at borrowing, you see that when you talk about highest indebted countries in the world, the amount of developed or civilized countries in the world, you have United States at the top of the chart as one of the highest indebted countries in the world. Then you have France and some other big countries.
Nail on the head.
Okay.
Nail on the head. Go ahead.
Okay. Now you have some civil rights and developed countries. Now the question is, why are we borrowing? Because in the case of Nigeria, you see over the years, from 1999 to 2015 of PDP leadership in Nigeria, they borrowed. And within 2015 to 2022, you see that the AP, they borrowed far more than PDP borrowed within the space of 15 years. So what we should be talking about this time around is that even when we want to borrow, are we borrowing for consumption? Are we borrowing to develop a system? Okay. Are we borrowing to involve
to produce? You mean?
Yes.
All right.
To involve the spirit of what we call the productivity.
Okay, just hold on. I'll come back to you. I think we get your point. PDP challenges Tinubu again. APC says Asiwaju will fall Atiku. The Punch newspaper, PDP challenges Tinubu again, while the APC says Asiwaju will floor Atiku. Go ahead, sir.
Very well. I think that I was actually very encapsulated, when I saw the headlines, because Nigeria as a multi-ethnic, a kind of religious nation, has to produce a leader that is capable of transforming the nation, especially the way we've actually, where we've seen ourselves today. And so when PDP comes out to challenge Tinubu, I think it is a good one, because for a leader to lead a country like Nigeria, one, you must be intellectually balanced. Two, you must be physically credible. Three, then you must have that leadership quality. And so I want to say that for a leader to come out to say, I want to lead Nigeria, you must be credibly a kind of and structurally convincing. And so we need a leader that, one, from possibly a head challenge where you can even stand up for like 10 to 15 minutes to actually deliver possibly a sermon or deliver anything to your people.
Now I have to move to someone else. We don't have that much time. I want to talk. Oh, you want to say something? All right, come this way. Don't go anywhere. Possibly I may come back to you if we have enough time. All right, good morning to you, sir. What's your name?
I'm Dr. Francis Oji Ndubusi Uduma.
Oh, Dr. Francis Oji. You have a number of national dailies here, so pick at random. Which of them you want to talk about?
Yeah, I just want to add to what somebody was talking about
I'll hold it for you.
Anxiety mountain as Nigeria's debt service lies deep.
That's the Daily Sun.
Yeah, that's the Daily Sun. Also talking about defactoring. Okay, I'm actually an economist and an accountant, and what I want to actually stress there is the aspect of financial regulation. Assuming that funds being borrowed, they are being scrutinized in terms of how they are being used, and the process of actually acquiring such a fund is justified in form of a kind of a zero-based budgeting, where you have to give an accurate justification of what the money will be used for, and then there will be a compliance audit to establish the fact that the purpose of which that such a fund was borrowed has actually been used as actually justified initially. That will go a long way in making us to be an investment-based economy, because most times, most of this money is being borrowed. You see, those funds being used to maybe refurbish the National Assembly, to increase people's salary. All those things are recurrent.
Okay, so Doc, you're just like my friend Oyeka, right? You see, your problem isn't borrowing money. Your problem is what the money is being used for, right? All right, just hold on. Compliance audit hasn't been done. All right, let me just take the Vanguard newspaper here. Before I possibly go back to my friends here. Tension in INEC, front page, infighting, threatening 2023 elections.
Uchokuru, they're braving the odds, especially with unreliable, and we could see that much from our end there, how the visuals weren't so great. Of course, gives a sense of how network can be unpredictable this Monday morning. But I still got some takeaways from some of the readers who gave insights onto topical issues of the day. And the first one that one of them said was about the issue of borrowing by the federal government, and where that has left us. Of course, when you talk about borrowing, it comes down now to the very intricate issue of debt servicing, and that has left Nigeria in a rather precarious issue. You asked our guest earlier, Mr. Chikechude, now about is Nigeria indeed broke? Of course, even the government of the day has been dancing around the issue. Some saying categorically it is, but I think the government, understandably and not surprisingly, hitting on the head that it isn't broke, even though there were some woes that it acknowledged at the beginning of the year. Crucial trillions of naira that we could have gotten, a substantial amount, talking about estimates of revenue projection. We didn't get the crucial naira that would have helped our reserves in the country. But the government is still optimistic against more dire predictions by analysts about where we could head if care isn't taken.
Yes, Kemi. I mean, and these figures are really very scary. It's interesting to see that Nigerians are very particular about not just the fact that the country is borrowing. I mean, we could argue that even the best countries of the world argue, even the most stable countries of the world argue. But they're also concerned about what exactly are we borrowing for? And that question has been directed to the government over and over again. What are we borrowing for? It is okay, analysts and financial experts have said, to borrow if you're borrowing to fix your infrastructure and put some things in place that will help you generate income. But then when you have to borrow for very silly things, in quote, I must say, when you have to borrow to pay salaries, you have to borrow for things that are not probably essential or considered as structures that will help improve your economy.
Well, many countries are experiencing a downturn in their economic fortune, and Nigeria isn't exempted. The country's fiscal position worsened as the cost of debt servicing surpassed government's revenue in the first quarter of the year 2022. Details of the nation's performance in Q1, that's the first quarter of the year, showed that Nigeria's total revenue stood at 1.63 trillion, while debt servicing stood at 1.94 trillion naira. This shows a variance of more than 300 billion naira. Now, the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Zainab Ahmed, speaking at the public consultation on the draft 2023 to 2025 medium-term fiscal framework and the fiscal strategy paper, also reveals that the gross Oil and Gas Federation revenue for this year was projected at 9.37 trillion naira, and as at April the 30th, 2022, only 1.23 trillion was realized out of the pro rata projection of 3.12 trillion naira. Joining us now in the studio to help make sense of this number and where Nigeria is headed is the founder and CEO, Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprise, Dr. Muda Yusuf, also the former DG of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Welcome. Thank you for joining us again.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning.
Welcome, Doctor.
So what do you make of these figures? There's a sharp, well, from our end now, there is a discrepancy. Nigeria was projecting this amount of trillions of naira, but then we didn't get as much revenue as we expected. Where does that leave us, really?
Well, it's a very disturbing situation. First, let me commend the fact that the minister was very open, at least putting all the information on the table. I think we must acknowledge that. Secondly, we must realize that we are heading for a very disturbing trajectory as far as the fiscal outlook is concerned. Because we have a situation where the revenue has not been performing well, it has been underperforming. Because if you look at all the revenue heads, there were very big variances, negative variances in all the revenue, whether you are talking about non-oil revenue or you are talking about oil revenue, independent revenue, and the rest of them. Whereas the expenditure has been growing. And that has been the trend over time. Because ideally, if your revenue is underperforming, you must have a tap on your expenditure. But that has not been the case. the cost of governance has been increasing. Then we have this very challenging situation of having to fund the petroleum subsidy, particularly the petrol subsidy. That again is a major issue for government, and it's neither here nor there, because there are arguments on both sides. But clearly, that is again not something that is sustainable. Then, of course, there are also issues around the leakages that we have been seeing in government. I mean, from all the investigation reports, EFCC things, and the way some very big, very senior operatives in government have been arraigned. We are not talking about small numbers now. We are talking about billions, 80 billion, 100 billion. And you have cases like that across the MBAs. So there are also cases of these leakages. Then, of course, you have shortfalls in revenue, because ideally, as an oil-producing country, when the oil price is going up,
as we see now,
is something that we should be celebrating. But unfortunately, first, because of the oil theft, we are not even able to meet our OPEC quota as far as the oil production.
Still due to this vandalism and the theft.
And that is, creating a major shortfall. And unfortunately, as oil price increases also, the cost of subsidy also increases. So rather than celebrate, we seem to be a victim of the high oil price. So that is also eating heavily into, look at the figure that were presented by the finance minister. For 2023 now, we are talking about over 6 trillion for subsidy. And for even the current year, it's likely to get close to that.
Yes. Doctor, we'll get into all of that. But I wonder if you think this action is in breach of all known reasonable debt sustainability thresholds on all fronts?
Of course, I think so. Because, of course, there are different metrics, for determining the sustainability of debt. There is the debt to GDP ratio, which the government often use, and which it's often said that, well, if you use that metric, we are within a reasonable threshold. Because if you look at debt to GDP ratio, maybe we'll be talking of something in the range of maybe 25 to 30%, But if you look at debt to revenue, because debt to GDP ratio for many countries is even as high as 100%. But the difference between some of those countries and our own country is that our GDP does not reflect the capacity to generate revenue. Because ideally, the bigger your GDP, the bigger your capacity to generate revenue. So that when you compare your debt to GDP, you can use that as a measure to determine sustainability. But if you have a country where some major components of your GDP are not revenue generating, that should not be a sustainable metric. Because if you look at the breakdown of GDP, for instance, the agric sector accounts for about 26% or so of GDP. The distributive trade sector accounts for about 16% of GDP. By the time you add those two, you are getting to 40 or 50% of GDP. What amount of revenue do you get from agriculture? Practically none.
Despite the investment, despite what the government has pumped into the agricultural sector.
Yes, because first, the agricultural sector is made up of peasant farmers. Most of them are informal. And rather even get taxes from that sector. Government is subsidizing the sector. And it's a major component of GDP. If you look at the distributive trade sector, the distributive trade sector accounts for about 16% of our GDP. Most of the operators in that sector, or players in that sector, are informal sector players. How much revenue can you get from them? So I'm saying this to buttress the point that for our own context, in our own context, you cannot be using GDP as a measure of your capacity to secure debt. What you can use to determine sustainability of debt is your capacity to the revenue that you use.
Which we don't have.
Which we don't have.
We don't have. But
so when you use that metric, you discover that we are really not our debt profile is actually not sustainable.
But the finance minister, Zainab Ahmed, has said the figures are likely or will. She's optimistic that the figures will improve in the next quarters. Do you share that line of thought in line with the discouraging factors that we see here now? You've spoken about fuel subsidy payments, vandalism, and the like. Are these figures likely to get any better soon?
Well, it may get better slightly, because the results of company results, will begin to come out maybe about now, up until June. So some of the tax revenue that are supposed to be remitted will be coming in possibly within this period, within the second quarter. So that may improve the revenue performance slightly. But generally, the outlook is very gloomy. That is the reality. And I think the minister also hinted at that is a very gloomy outlook. And she even hinted that perhaps most of the capital expenditure will not happen as a result of this outlook of revenue.
So is Nigeria broke?
I would say yes. I would say yes, because if you have a situation where your debt service commitment has exceeded your revenue, that is a crisis situation.
I wonder, Dr. Yusuf, if that puts a big question mark on this particular administration.
Well, it does. It does. But we must also situate it in some context. There are issues that are external. There are issues that are internal. What I mean is that there are factors that you can regard as endogenous factors that you can attribute to the quality of governance. There are factors that you can regard as being variables that are driven by global developments. For instance, we have had issues now with energy crisis. Energy crisis has been affecting a whole lot of businesses. And this energy crisis is as a result, primarily for now, as a result of what is happening globally. This Russia and Ukraine crisis, which has shot up the global oil price, which has shot up energy prices, which is fueling inflation, that ordinarily should have been a benefit for us. But because of the way we have also managed our own oil and gas sector, we have been penalized by it. So on one hand, you can see, well, there is an external factor, a global factor contributing to this. On the other hand, we have been penalized because we have not managed our oil and gas sector properly.
Let's build on that point now, the management and otherwise of our oil and gas sector. So we have a rebirth of the state oil firm, NNPC, now to be privatized somewhat. With the system, with the foundational issues now, do you have hope that we would have less gloomy times ahead in our oil sector?
Well, there's something positive coming from it. But it may not happen in the short term. Because the whole idea of this having an NNPC fully commercialized is to stop all the leakages, all the mismanagement and all of that has happened in the NNPC. So the trajectory, in my view, is that we have an oil company, a national oil company, that will be decoupled from political interference, that will be insulated from interference from the bureaucracy, that will be a lot more professionally managed, and that will be able to attract a lot more investors. This is a first step to it. It will still take some time for the value of the assets to be properly put together. It will take some time for investors to come on board, whether individual investors or institutional investors. But for me, I think it's a major step forward. And it's within the context of the Petroleum Industry Act. Because the more we allow the political actors to get involved deeply in the management of these institutions, particularly all these public enterprises, the more problems we have. That is what is responsible for the virtual collapse of all the refineries. That is what is responsible. Because how do you allow bureaucrats and politicians to be managing such very critical assets? That is what has brought us to this situation. And on top of that, we have all sorts of dysfunctional policy regimes, which has discouraged investment in those sectors. Otherwise, by now, we should be smiling about what is happening globally. But that is not the case.
Well, Doctor, I was just going to ask, if you say it's in the short term, no, in the long term, yes. The long term, how many years are you looking at? What projections?
Well, I'm looking at least for these things to take proper shape, I'm looking at maybe between 3 to 5 years. 3 to 5 years.
Yes. So Nigerians will have to go through this in the next 3 to 5 years.
Well, unfortunately, yes, because the fundamentals are very weak. The fundamentals are weak. But now we have problem of insecurity, which is affecting our agricultural sector very seriously. It's not abating. If anything, it seems to be getting worse. Then we have some policy problems around maybe our fiscal policy, foreign exchange policy, monetary policy, that can be dealt with in the short term, because policy don't take time for you to fix. If you properly address our foreign exchange policy today, we can see a turnaround in what happens in our foreign exchange environment. If you address our trade policy properly, we can see some impact around the performance of some industries, you know. So there are policy measures that can be taken, which are short term. Right. But if you talk about maybe structural issues like infrastructure and all of that, that will take some time.
So there are so many, you know, layers and layers and layers of this financial situation that Nigeria finds itself with. I don't know if we can accommodate as many as them now within the few minutes we have. But first now to the issue of the debt profile. You know, history has told us, you know, research has shown that the greatest economies of the world have also been borrowers, are still borrowing at this time. But Nigeria has done this, but we are not where we want to be or we expect we would have been, despite incurring this huge debt and even now having to service this debts at alarming costs. So I don't know how we can, you know, do this. Where are we missing the point? Despite these foundational problems that you have noted, have we even gotten the results of the loans that we incur developmentally? If you look at the development projects, have we even gotten that to start with? Are we even securing them, even the things that we have pumped in hard-earned money, dollars into?
Are we borrowing for the right reasons?
Yes, that's a very important question. Because if you borrow and you have something to show for it, it will not have any serious adverse effect on the economy or on the people. But if you borrow and you don't have something concrete to show, then we have a problem.
Is that what we are seeing now?
That is what we are seeing. Because some of these borrowings actually, ideally, and this is in line with even the Fiscal Responsibility Act, these borrowing should be used essentially to fund capital projects, particularly infrastructure. Because borrowing should be used to build the capacity of the economy to be able to repay the loan. That is what happens in the private sector. You don't borrow just to be paying salaries and to be paying overhead and all of that. We have a whole lot of that because the borrow is a major component of the budget financing. Because you use borrowing to breach the deficit in the budget. But if you look at the structure of the budget itself, the current spending is almost 80% or more. Infrastructure spending as a component of the budget is probably about 15%. We have other components of capital projects which are not even infrastructure. People can be buying all sorts of things in the office, building new office structure and all of that. That is also regarded as capital projects. But that may not directly impact on productivity in the economy. So the debt will be valuable or be useful to the extent that it enhances productivity. That is what we are missing here. Other countries borrow, yes, but they use it to build the productive capacity of their economies. But here, the bulk of the borrowing goes into the budget, and the budget is structured in a way that the bulk of the expenses are on recurrent expenditure. I mean, the size of government has been growing. We have been talking about reforming the public sector, cutting costs of governance. Rather than reduce, these costs have been growing. And on top of that, we have problem of corruption. There are all sorts of leakages. If you talk to people in the public sector, they share information. A lot of issues, and some of these things even manifest.
Yes.
Look at the billions of naira that some top officials of government have been alleged to have been involved in corruption.
Yes. Right.
And those are the ones that come to light.
Let me squeeze in this. I'd like to read something to you because some schools of thought have likened this path to that of the Sri Lankan government, which has also been suffering very seriously from economic crisis. The write-up says they believe that this is a game to make the Nigerian government implement globalist policies in exchange for debt relief. Those policies will in turn destroy Nigeria's economy instead of fixing it. So, do you in any way suspect any foul play?
No, that one is sounding ideological. It's sounding ideological. Because, I mean, like Ghana, for instance, they have something similar.
Also, they've gone on to apply for a bailout.
And all of that.
Right.
You know, once you run into a crisis and you need a bailout, the person that wants to give you the bailout, you have to look at how you are managing your economy. If you are not managing it well, they will not support it. They won't be giving you money, for instance, to go and be paying subsidy. They won't be giving you money to go and be paying huge overhead in the ministries and so on. They will give you money if you can put on the table specific projects that you want to implement. They give you money if you can put on the table how you want to restructure the economy in a way that you can make your economy more productive. So when you begin to sound ideological, that these are IMF prescriptions, these are World Bank prescriptions, it's neither here nor there. But sometimes, or most times, these prescriptions tend to correct a lot of dysfunctional policies that you have. I mean, they can tell you that, okay, go and review your foreign exchange policy. The foreign exchange policy has created a whole lot of distortions and dislocations in the economy as we speak. You have a parallel market that is going for almost 650 or 630 to the dollar. You have an official rate of about 416 or 420. How do you manage an economy that way?
Yes, I'm just going to squeeze in this because the minister, Zainab, has also projected that 6.72 trillion naira will be, has been budgeted for fuel subsidy in 2023. I wonder what your thoughts are about this whole issue of subsidy. She's optimistic that in June, or there's a plan that by June 2023, probably they'll put an end to this issue or this controversy of subsidy. I wonder what your thoughts are. And then, of course, we are also in a transitional phase. If a new government comes into place, I wonder if these fantastic ideas by Mrs. Minister will be affected.
Well, it's a very frightening scenario. Very frightening. Because if you are not careful, this problem of subsidy and debt service can bring down this economy. It can lead to a total, it can cripple the entire public sector.
So why do we hold on to a policy as risky as this?
No, the challenge is that sometimes you are confronted with social and political variables that can make it difficult for you to take some very important decisions.
Would you hold on to it? Would you retain the policy of paying subsidies if you were the minister?
Well, it has to be something that will require very robust engagement. First, we're in a transition period. Second, we are dealing with citizens that are hungry. Many people are angry. The poverty level is so high. Yeah. So these are very serious sensibilities that make some decisions very difficult to take. But there has to be, something has to give. There has to be more engagement. There has to be more inclusion in the process to see that at least if you can have a pathway in the middle to shift away gradually from this so that the pressure on the economy and the pressure of government will be much less.
All right. I'm afraid we've run out of time. Former Director General of LCCI and, of course, the founder and now the CEO, Center for Promotion of Private Enterprise, Dr. Muda Yusuf. Thank you very much for your contribution.
Thank you very much.